we want to have more in our lives, regardless of whether you're 10, 20, 40, 80, that you're still consuming the kind of information or material that will help shape you for life and to engage you in a way where you're seeing yourself discipled in a way that's towards good. Well, welcome back to the Ruth J. Simons podcast. And I've got everybody's favorite, Mr. Troy Simons, here with me today. Hey, babe, I'm glad you're here.
Good morning.
You know, we are at the time of this recording, a time of trying to get ready for this back to school season. And as it'll come out later in the fall, I know that you are, if you're a parent, you're in the throes of sending your kids back to school. If you're a student, you're kind of well into your semester. But one of the things that we talk about around our house a lot is this question of what's the point of all this preparation? Are we really preparing primarily for a job, or what is it really? Like, what's the goal of doing all this schoolwork and staying on top of education and learning or lifelong learning? If you're like me and you're a parent or you're a grown-up that's no longer in school, is there a point to learning? And so in case you're like, wait, I'm not an educator and I'm not a parent, I don't really care about this topic, let's just sum it up like this. Today's topic is about how you can prepare for life. That's really what we're talking about today. So Troy, I know that this topic is kind of a big deal to you. There was a time in our previous season when you led a classical school. And you often said, what did you used to say? I already forgot. You used to say, oh.
Well, the school motto that I came up with was,
look at me. I can't believe
learn for life, live for Christ.
That's it. I just didn't want to mess it up. Learn for life, live for Christ.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you break that down first? And then let's talk about we've got kids. In case you guys don't know, we have 6 boys. The oldest is 23, now officially out of the house, done with grad school. And then a 12-year-old is our youngest. So we've got the whole range, and we can talk a little bit about that, preparing them for life at every stage. But break down the learn for life, live for Christ. Why was that a special sentiment and perspective?
Probably most special because that's not what my education was growing up. And as I got older and I realized that, as I just kind of grew in my faith and realized that my education did not aim at really either one of those things, I wanted that to change for our boys.
Okay. So for anyone listening going, hey, let's figure out what the rub is. What do you think you were told is the point of going to school? What is the point of having a degree? What is the point of going into higher education or anything like that? What was the point?
Well, maybe a metaphor would help. And I think this is what a lot of people feel like this time of year. And, we're just about to start school. There's books, there's things to sign up for. There's all of these things. And it feels sometimes like a treadmill. Like I just got to get on the treadmill and I got to run for a while and then I have to get off. And that in contrast to this idea of like, no, education is like taking me somewhere and it's making me someone as I go. And I think that part of the struggle is that that's not always clearly in view from the institutions of education, that there's just this sense of like, oh, it's time to get it done. Oh, I've got to have these courses on my transcript. I've got to, I'm interested in the STEM side of things, so I'm going to go heavy on that. Or I'm interested in this, so we're going to go heavy on that. And it sometimes is just so disconnected from the reality of who we're becoming in the process. And when it's just like checked off the list, then it's just off the list, instead of recognizing that process of learning is part of us becoming.
You used to talk a lot about you just don't have a school to share it at the way you used to. But I heard you regularly share about how the Industrial Revolution really changed the way people viewed learning. That prior to the Industrial Revolution, it was very much based on master and apprentice, where
Yeah.
you're really trying to like become like the person you're modeling your life after. Right.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about studying history, like with intention, is when you see some of the changes that have happened in education, that industrial revolution time and the political upheaval, like there were big, massive changes being made to education at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think that most definitely suffered was education to the end of making a better worker, because America was industrializing. The whole world was.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of the kind of classical long held idea of like education being about the good man speaking well, that's a term from the history of education that I think is a great one, right? It's to produce a good man, right? And it aims at understanding what good is and how to educate somebody pushing that direction. And the evidence of that is that they speak well. And I think those are two things that are very hard to accomplish.
But to clarify, it's not just that they have good speaking skills, because you can get that and not be somebody who has a wealth of wisdom to speak about. Right. So it's not just to speak well, as in like, because when you say that, it sounds like you're saying you should have some oratory.
This rhetorician who is just the pinnacle of education. No, Jesus said, the good man from the stores of his heart speaks good. You'll know somebody by their fruit. And that's kind of what that is behind that idea of the good man speaking well, is that out of the goodness that he has learned to be and become, right, through that education process, the evidence of that is that what comes out of his mouth is markedly the educated man in that view.
Well, and to answer my own question, I think I was trying to get you to share a little bit about like the way you thought of education growing up. And I don't know if you actually did. So
I didn't. That was the problem, was I didn't think about education, except it was just something that I had to endure.
Okay. Because we're wired really differently. So it's kind of funny that you answered that way.
You had a lot of awesome opportunities.
But I thought of it like, it was a terrifying journey in that it was almost more like, if I don't do well in school, I will not have a good life. Basically, like, it's not even, this is something I just got to do. Like, if you were like, hey, this is the treadmill I've got to get on. This is a conveyor belt. I just got to get on it, get through it, get to the other side. My sense of it was the American dream. And granted, I was, born in Taiwan, immigrated to the United States, became a citizen in my high school years. But in those early years, it was like making a life. It was the whole idea was, if you don't get an education, if you don't get A's, if you don't do super well, which ended up causing the content behind Wins Driving C's, but if I don't do really, really well at all these things, then I won't have a good job. I won't have happiness. Nobody will like me. I can't be hired. I can't be important. I won't matter. All the things, right? That's really dramatic, but it's like those questions of like, will I matter? Right. Will my life have purpose? Those things were so tied to the idea of go through the system in which you'll have all the things, all the badges that say, I matter. I'm worth something. You need me on your team, and I'm going to produce a lot for whoever needs me to produce a lot, versus out of the overflow of my heart, I will produce what will bring honor to God.
Right.
That's a different perspective altogether. Right.
So many good things there. And like, you really did have an amazing educational experience. And we've talked a lot about that. So many cool opportunities. And what you had was a really strong why, like your drive. And that came out of your family and just kind of Chinese culture in general. And the school that you went to was, I think, very good at that. I think you would agree that the why was incomplete. Like, in a very practical sense, like, they prepared you to like crush it. And you've done so well.
Well, they prepared me to have a mentality, alongside my family culture and my college prep academia culture, they prepared me to not accept mediocrity.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of had an educational system that was like, just scrape by
I
if you
had
can,
the
right?
vaguest why. Like you can endure anything. I'm thinking it from the student who might be hearing this, like sitting next to mom listening to your podcast. It's like they're just dreading school, a lot of times, and they're just thinking of it as something to endure. But when you have a good solid why am I doing this? Then you can endure anyhow. And I think when you look at the larger picture of what education should be connected to, of like, this is really about who I'm becoming, then, for the parent, they have to work hard at understanding how to communicate that to their child, right? Truth, beauty, and goodness feed the human soul.
And for anyone who's in college, I might have hopefully I have some college age listeners here. And I would say college years are those years where you are quickly becoming more and more of the adult that you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like you're just jumping through a bunch of hoops. You're jumping through a lot of,
because let's be honest, there are just some things that it's like, that's just a hoop. And my degree program or society just says, I got to do that. And at some level, I think you can just say, enough people have said that this is worth requiring people to do. I'm just going to suck it up and do it. This is not my jam. This is not my subject. I don't really like it.
Everybody needs trigonometry.
Yeah. Fascinatingly enough, like in my later years, math was like always my Achilles heel. But as Caleb was talking about trig and putting it into context for me, I was pretty fascinated and wished that I had the chops to like dive into the numbers, because there is a fascinating application to it. And that's true really of almost any subject.
Okay. So if we were to take all that 30,000 foot viewpoint and bring it down a little bit closer for somebody who is feeling, kind of like tired of being in school, maybe, I'm hoping that this reaches the ears of a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old, and maybe even somebody who's going back to school or somebody who's experiencing a career change. I think this is applicable for all. So my question is, let's talk about, and I'll let you go first because I feel like you're really the expert on this, but when you say education, or let's not even use the word education because that carries with it this whole idea of like school, but learning. What does continual learning, or just really submitting to the process of education, how does that form somebody? What are the opportunities we can have? When you say that, do you mean like having good study skills? Do you mean like the way we think about life? Get a little bit grittier about, like, if you could make a list of 10 things that you would say, don't stop learning, submit to educational processes, regardless of where you stop in your, whether you do college or not, or, graduate school or not, that's not as important as applying yourself to learning. What would be your apologetic for why we have to apply ourselves in learning? How does that shape and form us?
Let me answer with two things. Number one, the scriptures make it clear that our first introduction to God is through the creation, right? The heavens declare the glory of God. Before a kid can even necessarily read his or her Bible, they're seeing God's beauty, God's creation, and that's our entire lives. And if you think about it, that humanity has done a really good job in rejecting God by coming up with theories of any possible way that it could be not created by God and not showing the evidence of God. And I say that both for a student and for a parent. Like a parent, that's got to be their message of like, we get to behold the glory of God, not just by going outside and looking with our eyeballs, but like when you get the power of numbers, when you get the power of language. Numbers help us understand how the planets cruise and the universe expands and all this crazy stuff. And then when you give a kid language, they can describe it. They can write songs about it. We can read poems about it. We can write books about it. And the second part of that is that when you look in Genesis at what after God created Adam and Eve, he said, be fruitful, multiply, and subdue the earth. Be lords of the earth. Now, how can you do that if you don't know what the earth is all about? I think there's a reason why God had Adam name the animals. It was the beginning of his understanding of the domain that he was going to be required to rule over. And I'm telling you right now, kids and parents.
And writing books about it.
Yeah, exactly. If you will give your future self the gift of steady study, of reading good books, of grinding it out with like getting at least the kind of grasp on math that will prepare you for what is normal everyday life for a non-engineer, you'll think yourself. You really, really will. Being able to use at least one language very, very well, write it, speak it, right? And if you aim at those things of not just like, I've got to like at least get a B in my class, my English class, or I've got to read this book, right? Look at it as an opportunity to give your future self something that you have no idea when that's going to come in. I mean, think about the books that you read. You read a ton of amazing books.
I can't remember hardly any of them. I know,
and it's funny because a lot of it's like, I don't even remember what that's about. But what does show every single day in what you do is the mark that it left on the way that your mind works.
Or maybe the way I think a beautiful sentence is written.
Yeah.
Never thinking that I was ever going to be an author.
You might not be able to quote something from Hawthorne, but when you read Hawthorne back in the day, it was like, wow. That dude put it together.
I was super, super into literature and I loved critical analysis. So I thought I was like supposed to be like a professional, analyst of some kind. And that kind of writing was hard for me to transition into more creative or more like casual writing. But, I think you know this, but I took an AP, American Lit class my sophomore year of high school and passed and got college credit for it. But that's when I read so many, like, when you say Hawthorne.
Yeah, classics.
All the classics. And I can't remember a single thing. I literally cannot remember. It also might be the perimenopause, but I cannot remember anything. But I really do think that all that time spent on thinking about why these words matter and why this is connected to this and why an author would think a certain way and then create a picture that would lead the reader down a journey. I think I use that subconsciously all the time now.
Absolutely. And I think a message to students of a variety of ages would be like, hey, listen, yeah, you're pushing through some hard reading. Those classics are not easy to read, right? They're like kind of at a different level.
Do you think people should read them at 30?
But when you do, don't think of yourself as like, okay, I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
No, you're doing something that is shaping the way that you think, that's giving you an appreciation for what makes a good book, not just the book itself.
Okay, so for the 13-year-old that is required to read the Iliad or the Odyssey, or, for the 16-year-old that is required to read The Great Gatsby or any of those classics, they're like, I'm required to read those. So, okay, Mr. Simons, I'm going to work at thinking through how this is going to change me or shape me. I don't know if we can say more about that. I think we can just summarize that by it will shape you. It will, like how you apply yourself in learning those things, applying it, thinking about those things will shape you in those younger years. But what about for the 30-year-old? What about for somebody who's like maybe a mom who is in the throes of like raising little people, 2-year-olds and babies, and she feels like she has zero time and she didn't read To Kill a Mockingbird, or she didn't read Scarlet Letter, or she didn't read C.S. Lewis's, or I was going to ask you about The Abolition of Man, which I've never read, but this is what we're talking about, right? Being formed and shaped. And so what do you think Lewis would say to a 30-year-old about reading classics or taking time to learn, and not just from TikTok or Instagram? Like, what's the point of actually applying ourselves to learning boring, quote, or air quote, boring things, right? Because I don't have a lot, I'll just be honest. I'm an almost 50-year-old and I don't have a whole lot of, energy, bandwidth, capacity, or even interest sometimes to go read something that is not immediately going to turn into something that helps me produce something. That's just true confessions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we're in school, when we're younger, we're like, I got to read this paper or read this book because I'm going to write a paper, an essay on it and get a grade. And then when you're older, you're like, I don't get a grade on this. So
Nobody's holding your feet to the fire.
Unless I'm reading something that will teach me how to parent. So yeah, you could probably hand me a book.
Right. It's very practical.
Yeah. I get kind of like, tell me what I'm supposed to say to my kid when he's going through this. Or, I mean, I might want to read a book on parenting. I might want to read a book on going through, I write books on helping people learn how to navigate different seasons of their lives or navigate different ways in which they can walk with Jesus. That's literally what I write about. I'm wanting people to grab a hold of this book and apply it right away. But what about the books that are not super applicable or skills that are like, I don't really know why I would try to learn the skill. What would Lewis say about that? Does he say anything about it, about learning and the goals of learning like that?
Oh, he does, absolutely. And in a lot of places. And you mentioned the abolition of man. He was calling out things that he was seeing in his day that he knew would ultimately take the heart out of humanity and just obliterate the things that make us the most robust people that we can be. It's an amazing book. It really is. It's a tough one to read. It's short, grind it out. You also mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird. You look at the commentary that's going on in the midst of what is just a really fantastic story. If there's a mom out there that's yeah, I have a kid on my lap right now. I'm listening to this. And this is there's no way in the world, you know what? Keeping that in the bathroom or your bedside or just some place where you can sneak a little bit. Kill a Mockingbird is a phenomenal story that says so much that would be helpful for where we're at as a society right now, right? And in those comparisons. And I just think, as hard as it is, recognizing that sometimes our mental diet is like sugar. It's like junk food. That, be it through our phone, our social media feed, just these super short snippets that just, okay, so here's maybe my best analysis I can give. You get on Instagram or TikTok or any of these social media things, and there is no beginning and there is no end.
No, you have to force yourself to get off.
Yeah. It's like a moving path.
But my brain is shifting gears every 10 seconds.
Right.
Right.
But if you think about a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's a point to it. And by the time you get to the end and you get that point, it informs you more about humanity, about yourself. You can see yourself through that lens. And I think the lens that we get with social media so often is a distorted one. It's plastic. It's people who are trying to put their very best foot forward, people who are trying to, get something out of you monetarily or some other something. And it ends up being a kind of a toxic circle that doesn't necessarily make you a better person at the end of it.
I think as we land this plane, this is a really great and applicable way for us to think through this. I think it's that whenever, and I'll start by just analyzing myself, whenever I get on social media, I might feel like I'm learning a ton, learning how to do something, cook something, learning how to make a video, learning.
Because there's so much information.
Yeah. But if I'm preparing for anything at all, it's not actually preparing my heart to live a more fruitful life myself. It's for me to learn how to win the game compared to somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else listening to this feels that way, but I think the reason why it feels like comparison, even if you end up being on social media, just learning how to do a makeup routine or, and I don't hate social media. I use social media. I'm on social media, but I see the effects of how it's changing me and how it can change me. And I'm constantly trying to understand this greater. But I think at the end of the day, I turn on my phone thinking I'm going to go learn something that will prepare me for life. And what it really does is prepare me for more hustle or more fear-driven productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there's one thing that I hope our listeners will kind of wrestle with a little bit is there anything in my spiritual or emotional diet that is helping me feed on and grow in a way that will prepare me for life and not just more productivity. And I think, I'm not saying, and I don't think you're saying, all the educational systems or what kind of school you go to from K through 12 or college or grad school. You're not saying that the specific curriculum, one way or the other, is going to shape and form you. You're actually saying, and I think I'm saying too, that fundamentally it's that if you go into learning with a desire to be shaped and formed, even if you don't agree with what you're reading. Like if you're reading something and you don't agree with it, you can still be shaped and formed by the way you interact with that material.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
So I guess that's where I hope to land the plane here today, is just to say, we want to have more in our lives, regardless of whether you're 10, 20, 40, 80, that you're still consuming the kind of information or material that will help shape you for life and to engage you in a way where you're seeing yourself discipled in a way that's towards good, towards beauty, towards truth, and not just towards more doing and hustling and productivity.
Yeah.
What's one thing you could leave us with, Troy, as an encouragement to anyone who might feel kind of dry and not interested in, maybe it's easier just to surf the internet than to actually sit with their Bibles or consume a good book or read a good commentary or sign up for a new skill that they haven't learned yet?
Yeah.
What would you say to that person?
Oh man, that's tough. It is tough because it was a Puritan who said, to the carnal man, spiritual things are as bland as an egg white. And I think that principle holds. Like when you're just used to junk food, like you don't have an appreciation for good food, and good food takes time to prepare. And so part of it is that you have to believe. You have to believe that there's something better, and that it's worth pursuing. And then whatever it is that helps you get through the barrier of it, like get together with other people who maybe are in your same shoes, but don't want to be in those shoes, and say, well, hey, let's hold one another accountable. Let's read a book together. Let's be accountable to like spend less time doing these things that they're entertaining, but they don't really like make a better me. And let's partner in this and do something different.
Yeah.
And then for the student, there's a lot that they have to endure, right? You might not be in the absolute best situation around peers who really don't care about school, teachers who are probably stressed out and just trying to make it through the day. I would say, boy, go home and talk to your parents, and don't despair. Like, look for the truth and the beauty and the goodness, even in the process that you're in, and recognize that there is a formation that's happening, and it's part of what helps you to become the person that God's created you to be. So
it's a really good beginning to a big conversation, and hopefully for all our listeners, this is the beginning of you even taking it to your people in your home, your family, to your friends. If this episode has been helpful or has kind of gotten your gears turning a little bit, send this episode to a friend, send it to your spouse, send it to somebody and say, let's talk about this. Ruth and Troy, I think we're trying to begin this conversation. Let's have this conversation ourselves as well. And I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about how you're learning and growing and changing and how you're becoming, because you're focusing less on just producing and more on becoming. So send me an email, leave me a comment, leave us a review. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.